While James Cameron's The Terminator sits in the shadow of its big brother, it's of course still very well regarded in the film community today. With my official first comment on this channel requesting I look back on this movie, I thought I'd do just that. See, I'm not lying at the end when I say to leave what movie or game you'd like to see reviewed in the comments. Given how new this channel is, I'll probably do whatever your comment says. Anything. But today we're looking back at the classic sci-fi action horror film, The Terminator. Directed by James Cameron in ostensibly his directorial debut, there was an earlier film he did called Piranha 2, but I think he was allegedly fired partway through the production of that, and the producer directed most of it. I don't know, but as far as I know, Cameron considers The Terminator to be his genuine debut, but I could be wrong anyway. The film centers around a robot sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor, the mother of John Connor, the man who would lead the human revolution against the robot uprising, preventing him from ever existing. And the humans managed to send back one of their soldiers, Kyle Reese, to protect Sarah Connor. This robot, known as a Terminator, is a ruthless, brutally efficient killing machine that will stop at nothing to complete its goal. The film was groundbreaking in a lot of ways and is still revered as a bright spot in an increasingly worsening franchise, but will modern viewers get much out of it? Will the action still have the same impact? Will the mid-80s visuals distract from the tension? We'll discuss all this and more. Let's see if The Terminator holds up.
All right, listen. The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine.
Infiltration unit. Yeah, this guy won't stand out at all in the post-apocalypse where people are starving to death.
He saw the Terminator initially as someone who would really blend in.
The Terminator I always saw as this kind of cipher, this kind of anonymous guy.
While it gets more of a character in the sequel, Arnold's Terminator is really just a movie monster with absolutely no characterization given to him, but even still, you understand his motivation.
One of the shocks of the film was that people related to the Terminator so much. And I think it's because there's an awful lot of pent-up rage and frustration, and a lot of that frustration is because we're, in a crowded urban society and job pressures and things like that, and people don't get to act out these fantasies. And we live in an age of weapons where you can't just punch somebody without them pulling out a gun and shooting you. You can't yell at somebody on the freeway without them, shooting you with an AK-47. So
Kyle Reese is a step up, with the viewer clearly sympathizing with his goal to protect Sarah Connor, but I didn't catch much character growth from him. He's just sort of this scarred wild animal, which makes sense given where he's from, but there isn't a ton of depth to his character. Even Sarah Connor, who I found to be in this strange quasi-lead character role, partially shared with Kyle Reese, which I found weird, doesn't have too much going on character-wise. Like, she's clearly the main character, but the movie doesn't go all the way to make her feel like the lead, if that makes sense. But she's the only one with any sort of character arc, and even then it's a pretty weak one in my opinion. Her arc is just that, I don't know, she becomes hardened.
On your feet, soldier! On your feet!
That she starts to take the first steps to becoming the person who will help John Connor grow into the hero of the future he's destined to become.
Sarah Connor taught her son to fight, organize, prepare from when he was a kid.
Maybe I missed something, but I didn't get much depth out of her or any of the other characters, but it didn't really detract too much from this particular film. The movie operates as sort of a slasher. There are some who regard it as a horror movie, and I would definitely say it dips its toes in that camp. The way Sarah Connor's friends die here is very reminiscent of the quintessential 80s slasher type stuff, and Arnold basically operates as a slasher movie monster trying to kill the, quote, girl. He's a pretty good one too. The Terminator is a pretty terrifying concept actually, and the film is wrought with tension. I'd seen the movie once before, nearly 7 years ago to the day, when I was much dumber, and I found it admittedly pretty meh back then, so I was surprised at how engaged I was with my viewing this time around. There are maybe one or two minor places where I felt the pacing got a teensy bit sluggish, but overall this is a very well-paced, efficient little movie. It actually gets pretty dark in certain places. I found the fact that the Terminator went and killed Sarah's mom and the way he coerced Sarah to find her location to be particularly gruesome and unsettling.
I love you too, sweetheart.
The police station scene stood out to me as pretty great, not the least of which being for its awesome shootout or the location of the iconic "I'll be back" line.
So Reese is crazy?
In technical terminology, he's a loon.
Sarah is given just enough logic to make her think that maybe, just maybe, Kyle was indeed just a schizophrenic crazy person and the Terminator was just a particularly hardy serial killer wearing a bulletproof vest to feel as though she was safe, all for it to come crashing down. I love how in the scene immediately following this one, she's just totally on board for all this Terminator stuff.
What's it like when you go through time?
This really feels like a B movie, as much as Arnold and Cameron don't seem to really want to admit it.
And, or like what some thought was just a B movie.
From its concept, to its execution, to its pointless gratuitous nudity, the film is definitely a high-budget B movie. God, between this and Halloween 3, I'm realizing directors seem to grossly overestimate the horniness of women in these dire situations. Like, yeesh. Do y'all think a man wrote this? The movie is pretty much 50-50 in regard to its special effects, ranging from absolutely fantastic to pretty terrible and obvious to whatever this monstrosity is supposed to be.
And I myself would ask myself, is this me or is this the dummy? There was no way of telling the difference.
Most of the miniature effects, especially in the cuts to the future, look obviously like toys, and the stop motion just looks terrible, as does virtually any use of stop motion in films in my opinion. A lot of the rear screen projection looks pretty bad, but a lot of it actually looks pretty dang good. I can usually spot rear screen from a mile away, but a lot of the shots of the future here actually match really well. You know, they combined every trick in the book here.
What I added to this charge were two AG1 General Electric flash bulbs, and to create that orangey effect was a orange amber gel over the flash bulbs. I would have the flash bulbs go off first and then the explosion, and what I would do to create a fiery effect was to use, of all things, walnut dust.
The endoskeleton of the T-800 looks great and moves pretty believably at the end here, and the little touches like the explosions and laser beams all come across very well. But man, some of the lows this movie hits in terms of its effects are pretty low. At least with this fucking thing, they cut to the profile of Arnold, which kinda brings you back to reality, and I'd never say anything bad about the great Stan Winston, but I think a modern audience is just gonna laugh at some of the really particularly dated looking stuff. I love how Kyle Reese is weary of the construction equipment, given that in his time period he had to actively fight similar looking machines. I really like the transition from past/present to the future, going from the construction vehicle to the evil robot crushing human skulls. There's a similar transition in the scenes preceding and following the opening credits. Pretty great stuff. You know, I'm just gonna come out and say it, I think this is James Cameron's best film. It's not his biggest, it's not his most ambitious, but I'd argue it's his least flawed film.
Did you call moi a dipshit?
There are greater heights in many of his other films, but their lows go far lower for me than anywhere the Terminator goes.
What I was thinking was, what could have happened to this girl to make her think she had no way out?
You know, I'm sure that statement will be met with plenty of controversy from fans of Aliens, T2, and Titanic, but I'm gonna stand by it. I mean, look, this movie is great, but this isn't a classic review. We're not saying if this is necessarily good or bad, and this isn't about whether I personally enjoyed it, which I'll admit I did quite a bit. Remember, folks, this is does it hold up? I think the majority of its really good looking effects would unfortunately largely just get ignored. Like, did you even know that the truck explosion at the end here was done entirely in miniature? I bet you didn't, and it looks freaking great. But really, the bad looks pretty dang bad in 2021 and hurts the movie a lot in terms of it holding up. On the other hand, the movie is incredibly engaging and represents a lot of Cameron's strengths as a director. It's well shot, well paced, and has extremely well executed and tension-laden action scenes that I think will actually work very well for a modern audience. I'm gonna say that the Terminator does hold up, with my gut giving it a 65-35 ratio. As always, if you liked the video, please subscribe and let me know in the comments what movie or video game you'd like me to take a look at next. Thanks for watching.